Hello, welcome back to I Got Board Game.
I got board game.
I Got Board Game. Friday of the new year.
2021.
2021.
Rocking it.
And our first review of the new year is of a very popular game. We're just here to
Basketball person.
What is that?
I don't know. It's some human arm span.
Human arm span is what we are reviewing today. If you haven't heard of it, very popular. Winner of
Real
the
one.
Kenner Wing. Hot wing.
Hot wing.
Getting closer.
You thought I was going to do the real game because I always do it second. But I didn't.
Very, very popular game, Hot Wings. Oh, Wingspan. Not Hot Arms. Okay.
Not Hot Arms. Not basket wings.
Reviewing the very popular Wingspan, finally.
Mm-hmm.
I have had this game for a long time, but it's obviously taken a while for us to just get around to reviewing all the most recent popular games. But so Wingspan is a game for 1 to 4 players, 5 players.
5 players.
Oh yeah, good number. 1 to 5. Box says it plays in 40 to 70 minutes. I would say maybe longer though, maybe like an hour and a half.
Yeah, it depends on if it's new players, right? If it's learning the game for the first time.
So I would say more towards like 45 an hour, hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think 40 minutes though.
That's like speed run.
Yeah. But it is by Stonemaier Games, which we have reviewed Viticulture from.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like the production of their stuff. Also known for doing like games like Scythe and Between Two Cities. Tapestry was a big one from them last year. But anyways, today's about Wingspan, which came out in 2019. Competitive resource management engine building game, primarily engine building. And with this really lovely bird theme and art. And so to get into the game, I will go over very briefly the rules because there's quite a bit going on. Not to say that it's very heavy, but there's just kind of a lot of things that kind of interact with each other, mechanisms that interact with each other in the game. I would say overall, though, it is more of a little heavier than a family weight game. So I think families can play this. I can imagine actually like a middle schooler learning to play the game. They might not do well, but they can learn it. And we'll kind of talk more about that learning curve and stuff later. And I do want to mention this is the first design by Elizabeth Hargrave. Her first design, which won the Kenner Spiel des Jahres. The Jahres. The Gamer Game of the Year or Enthusiast Gamer of the Year award, which is kind of the advanced award given to games in the category of Game of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
Right, there's a Spiel des Jahres, which is kind of like family, just regular Game of the Year, and then the Enthusiast Gamer Award, the Kenner Spiel. So it won it, and so that's huge for her too. Mm-hmm. So like I said, getting into a quick overview of how the game works, let me share this image we have from online of the game set up, presumably for 2 players, you can see here. So in the game, to set up, each player will get their own folio, which opens to this player board. There is the little bird house, tree house thing here, bird feeder. There you go. That's the word. And then you have the box, which holds the cards, is used as the display for the birds that you can kind of attract to your board. Mm-hmm. And you have the public goals for points, and then you'll have your hand of cards and your private goals or bonus cards. And then you have the custom wooden dice, all these different colored eggs, which all function the same, and tokens for the different kinds of food that birds want. And so to set up, you'll bring out all these components like this. Each player gets a board, shuffle the deck of bird cards, show 3, give players their starting hand, bonus card, and roll the dice, the food dice in the bird feeder.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way the game plays is over 4 rounds. As you can see on this tracker here, there's 4 rounds. And in each round, players will have a number of actions equal to the number of cubes they start with, which I believe is 8.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, that number will decrease in each round. So you'll have fewer actions as the game goes on. But then the way you play your turn is you're going to use 1 cube. You always have to do 1 action on your turn, and you're going to put it into one of these 4 rows you can see on the bird, or the 4 kind of habitats, if you will, or 4 rows and 3 habitats. And basically, you'll do what that row says. So you could play a bird card from your hand, adding it to your aviary, because you're basically trying to build up your aviary, collecting these birds. You can gain food that certain birds will want to come to your aviary. Have birds lay eggs, which will be used to also then hatch more birds, or draw bird cards from the row here, the selection up there. And so you'll just do 1 action, and then it'll pass to the next player. They'll do one of those actions, and it'll keep going around. And so overall, what's going to happen, though, is as the game progresses, you're going to be adding bird cards from your hand to these rows, which are the different habitats that those specific birds might require to be in. So those are kind of like the limitations on what the bird needs. And you also pay the food that the bird needs to play the card. And as they get played into these rows, they're going to enhance these rows or enhance these actions in future turns. Because as you stack birds on, when you choose to do, for example, in this image, the gain food action, you wouldn't just gain food, which is based on the dice in the bird feeder, but you would actually activate from right to left each bird along the way in that row. So you would do the brown ability on this bird first, and then this bird, and then end with this action of gaining food. And so you're essentially going to be using these birds in your rows to increase what you get for each action, each turn you have. And so that's how the game is an engine building game. And so then there's other small important rules that we're not going to go into details about, but other requirements for playing birds into your rows will require eggs as you play birds into the further columns in your board. And then birds themselves have all these details on their cards, such as how many points they're worth at the end of the game, how many eggs they can hold, their own ability, their wingspan, which can matter for certain abilities on birds that depend on that. And this will keep going on for the 4 rounds, players taking turns until they have no actions each round. And then at the end of each round, you'll see who is winning certain public objectives and marking it on this board on the side of who's fulfilling it the most, who's getting points for it at the end of the game. And you'll repeat this. And at the very end, you'll count up all the points on your birds that you've played onto your board, all the eggs you still have on your board, the points from your public goals, and from your own bonus card. And you'll tally it all up and see who has the most points, and that person is the winner. And so coming back on top, that was a really quick overview. As you can see, there were a lot of these different things I was mentioning that do interact with each other. The stats on the birds versus the eggs, and you have your bonus cards to consider, what your bird cards actually need to be played. It all kind of can seem like a lot, but I would say, again, I would still say it's still like a family weight game, maybe a little heavier, that you can pretty quickly grasp and learn how to play, but then it's about learning how to do these well, how to get the most points out of how all these mechanisms work together. And so with that, we will go into the pros, where then we might even mention some of the smaller details of those rules, but we will go into the pros starting with John.
Yeah. So, I mean, to kind of segue ourselves from rules into that, I will say one of the pros of this game is that despite there being a lot of things that are going on in the game, it is a relatively quick and simple game for people to pick up. In actuality, there really isn't a lot of actions to take per se. Like, as we were showing, there really is only 4 major primary actions that happen in a turn, and you have just 8 actions that you use, right? There's the playing the birds, there's gaining food, there's getting more bird cards, and then there's adding eggs, right? Like those are the 4 primary actions in the entire game, right? You really don't have any other direct immediate actions. So it definitely has this feeling of like when you first start, it's very unique in the sense of like, oh, I'm trying to kind of bird watch and kind of see, hey, where are these birds? I need to start playing these birds. And it's very simple. It's very clear. Like my one action does this one thing. My second action does this one thing. And as you kind of play through it, as Ben was saying, the amount of actions that happen as you're doing those actions will increase, but it's in a slow, methodical way that you can track over time. So when you play your action cube, it's very clear on the board, like this is what you're supposed to do with it, right? So this is kind of moving a little bit into the design of the game, is that a lot of the symbolism and a lot of the ways that they designed the art and it designed how things look on the board makes it very clear for a player to know exactly what they need to do when you say, I'm going to do this action or I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah, I would kind of echo a point I said earlier of how I think I can see people like a middle schooler learning the game, but then doing well is different. And that's kind of how I always say it to people when I'm teaching them too. If they feel like it's too much, I always just say, no, you can learn it, but it'll just take time, just plays to get used to it and do better at it. Mm-hmm. But don't be worried about actually learning, like, because even if you just learn a certain part of the game of like, this is how I play birds to like a certain row and increase the actions I get when I do that row on my turn, then you can just like kind of focus on understanding how that works first, right? Mm-hmm. And then slowly get more of the rules in, and then you'll see, oh, okay, now I can start like strategizing or figuring out the right time to add a bird or versus laying eggs or versus getting more cards. And so you can kind of take it step by step. And I think it's not a big deal, right? It's also because I think part of that also is like maybe going to another pro is like the art and the theme that makes it seem really welcoming, right? Appealing to people in how it looks, and maybe the theme, or even if it's not a theme you don't care about, it's inoffensive, So like this game theme wise, kind of building your aviary, having all these different birds and beautiful art, like for me and maybe most people, I'm guessing, it'd come off like a theme that you don't think about much, right? It's not a theme you don't like, but it's like, okay, sure, it's a game with a lot of birds. And it looks
literally
nice.
A game about birds. That's all it is. It's literally just a game of birds.
And it like looks nice, so sure, I'll give it a try. It's not like birds. I'm not playing this, Mm-hmm. And so for me, at least, it definitely has that appeal of like, it's a game that has a theme I didn't think much about, didn't know I would be interested in, but when you're playing it, like, oh, it's really nice. It's really welcoming, really relaxing in a way. And that I think kind of adds to the ability to kind of learn it step by step and at a certain pace versus just feeling like I need to come into it as a super competitive game where I need to know everything to actually enjoy it. And so along with that, I would say this is maybe getting into actually the last big pro I would say for the game is I feel like this might be my first like real engine building game, where that term is used a lot in the board game industry, even for older games where, you kind of are collecting pieces or cards or abilities that then kind of chain together on your turn. And sometimes even abilities that just automatically happen on your turn and generate something. I think that's more of like the idea of a pure engine builder is one where you have an engine that continues to just give you things automatically, where Wingspan isn't that, but it is that idea of still building up your tableau of cards and actions so that you're getting more each time. Mm-hmm. And it's all kind of comboing together, like converting one item to another kind, and then, storing this for points or something like that. And so as in that way, as an engine builder, I really like, I think it's a great, clean system for feeling like you're building up to be able to do more and more as you play the game.
Yeah, and I think this game really, as Ben, just kind of echoing this statement, is like the engine building really is probably one of the best ways that engine building has ever been kind of implemented into the game. Because as we were mentioning, one of the unique things about this game is you actually start losing actions as rounds pass in the game, versus in most games you'll typically just stay at the same amount of actions. It'll usually be more of a limitation on the number of actions that you have when you start the game, of maybe being like 4 or maybe being like 5, and then you're stuck at that many actions. But then as the game progresses, you're just adding more components, so then you always have those same actions. But in this game, it's kind of the reverse, where you're given a lot of actions early, right, for the first couple of rounds, and you can do a lot with them, but it's very simple, right? You're only doing 1 or 2 things usually especially the first round, right? And then as the game progresses, then you're able to do more things per action because of your engine being built, but the amount of actions that you have to do starts reducing, right? Because as we were showing with the round tracker, is you're taking those action cubes and putting it on where you're scoring. So you're actually actively losing that piece that is your actual action. So then you have less and less. So then it does become one of those things of, okay, now it becomes more about how efficient or how well am I using the actions that I have. So as Ben is showing right there, is those cubes are your actions. They're stuck on that scoring for the rest of the game, right? So you don't get those back. There's no way to take them or anything. It's just there. So I think that's a really cool thing. And then I think the other thing that's cool component wise with these action cubes is that it's not just like you place this action cube somewhere and then it just sits there, and then you kind of have to remember all the different things that go on. Like mechanically, the game makes basically how you go through your actions is you take the cube, it starts on the far right of the board of the row that you're doing the action. You start there, do the action in that section, then you move the cube over to the next card, do whatever actions are on there, so on and so forth. So then it also makes it very clear like what actions you're doing with the clarity of the way that the engine is working, which I think is also a really nice design. And I know Ben's actually talked about in a couple of our previous videos about clear rule clarity of like what happens or how to do things. And this game makes it so there's really no question, right? It's not like I'm going to activate a different power ahead of another power, and then like you have the choice of when you want to activate the powers. It is actually based on when you play these cards in the tableau. So you also have to be kind of thinking about, as I'm building my engine, is it worthwhile for me to put certain birds in these spaces? Because maybe I can play it now and maybe get an immediate benefit, but it may not actually work so well with my engine that eventually I'll want to build up in the future, right? But it makes it very clear for you to think about how to do that, versus in maybe other games where you're doing engine building, it can be a little bit more superfluous or a little bit more, superfluous is the wrong word. It could be a little bit more unclear about kind of the
like
when
tracking
something will happen, right? Or like how you choose when something will happen. This streamlines that kind of decision-making process a lot more.
Yeah, I think with the stuff that you just said, there were like these small points, like I think in the design that I think, yeah, are really smart, kind of adding to what you just said about how the action works and going from right to left. Yeah, I think the other thing is that the cube you end up using for this action on that turn stays on your board at the end there on the left. And so in a sense, if you want, like you can in a sense backtrack to see that everyone is taking their turns, right, in equal amount. And then you can kind of see what they actually did on their turn. Not necessarily for like even strategy purposes, like that could be something you'll eventually pay attention to if you're really into the game.
Yep.
But, you know, even just tracking actions of knowing like, okay, you've had 2 actions this round, that person only had 1, so it has to be their turn now, you know, so just knowing that. Exactly. And then also with the using your cube to put it on the public goals, right, to make sure who won which goal or how much they won each goal each round. Like I think that's so smart, right? Because like maybe the default thinking would have just been like, okay, we have this public tracker, so we need to produce some other token for each player to put on the tracker. But no, will just use one of their action cubes each round. So we're not like producing some pretty unnecessary component, just for tracking that. But one, it'll use one of their cubes, action cubes, to track it each round. But then it'll also decrease the number of actions they have next round, which I think is a very smart design choice because it helps with the scaling, which is probably what John was also getting at, right?
Yeah.
Where like the game length in like kind of the hypothetical you were presenting, right? If you start with 5 actions, just keep building up, people are going to feel that their turns are getting longer and longer.
Exactly.
And the time between your turns is getting longer and longer, which makes the game less engaging, less fun. And so to kind of increase the how much you get out of each action, but then decrease your number of actions, it is still have that sense of you're building up and doing a little more, but not to that bad extent of just constantly adding more and making my turns so much longer. And so I think that's really smart.
Yeah.
And then I think oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to move on to like the bird feeder.
Yeah.
Just a small pro I had about that is because one, it's lovely components. I mean, that's a whole different pro, the production of it. But like these food dice, you roll them into this bird feeder, which is essentially a thematic dice tower. For those of you who don't know that term, it's basically any kind of contraption like this in the board gaming world that's used to kind of roll your dice down.
Yeah.
But you would start with the dice in there rolled randomly, and then the gain food action lets you take one die from there, and basically you would take a corresponding token to indicate that you got that food. But I think a smart thing about the way this is implemented in the game is that it's not just you put all the dice in, all 5 dice, and players have to take food until there's no more dice, and then maybe you re-roll at that point or something like that. Where there is a small mechanic of whenever all the faces of the dice inside the bird feeder match each other, the next player who's getting food from it can choose either to still take one of those dice as food, or they could choose to re-roll and then take from the new selection. So it's a nice small way to mix it up where it's not as straightforward as just take the dice until there's no more, because in those kind of games, whether it's dice or cards, right, it can end up in situations where no one wants what's there. And that's just going to stay like that for the rest of the game, and that kind of makes it pointless at some point in the game.
Yep. And I'll step in on that because that's one of the things I hate about dice mechanics in games in general is when you really when you get stuck with the randomization of a particular roll and you're kind of stuck, right? Because it's like, I don't want any of these resources and I can't do anything with it and this sucks. But in this way, the game actually is like hey, there's a bunch of it's all faces of resources you really don't want and you really don't care about. But rather than being stuck with having to waste a resource to re-roll it or get rid of them, now this game actually puts that into account where you have the option to get yourself out of that rut effectively, which actually is a really nice thing because there are a lot of games out there where sometimes it feels like, oh, I'm stuck with an action that I don't want to take. And this game is all about action efficiency and making a good engine. So it's like, crap, I have to waste my my turn or my resources to do something just because I literally have no choice. But in this way, it actually gives you that opportunity. Now, of course, it's not perfect, right? There are circumstances where it could just be a bunch of faces. It's not ideal, but just having that not require any of your personal resources is, I think, a really nice kind of twist on it versus, again, effectively having to use your kind of resources.
And then one of a little advanced ideas or strategies that come into play because of how it's done is then you could get to a point where you realize, oh, I can get this food, but then it will let the next person who do it re-roll. And then you'll be like, nah, I'm not going to take the food now and wait for someone else to do it. So I can re-roll or something. That's just a little more advanced strategy relating to that mechanic. That's added because of that option now.
Yeah.
And so then the other pro I want to move on to is the way the cards are done here with the bird selection. Mainly the cards themselves first. There's a lot of cards in this game. Let me see if the back of the box
170, I think. if I remember correctly.
How many did you say?
I think 170 bird cards.
Yes, 170 in the base game.
In the base, yeah.
Yeah, and then I mean the detail in the game is just so lovely. Not just the art, but with the birds, every card is a different bird.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like so crazy to think about the kind of interest the person, the designer had in this topic to look into that and share that, right? Because then you have 170 different birds. That's not to say all the abilities are necessarily different, but I do think my guess is actually that like I mean, there aren't abilities that are like repeated that often, maybe a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, the combination of the ability with the egg capacity or how many eggs a bird can carry and the nest type that they live in
Mm-hmm.
and how many points they are worth
And their
and the habitat they go into and the food they need and their wingspan. Like I think I would believe all of those are unique, like, you know, combined together onto a card. And so I would think all those cards are actually unique from each other. Mm-hmm. And so I think, again, me listing all those things out, all those details are included and they're not made up, you know, like I think in the rules, there might have been something that mentioned how, you know, the egg capacity is the amount of eggs it can hold in the game is some kind of scaling to how it is in real life, right? Maybe not the exact number. It could maybe be like a certain range of numbers of eggs, but like that real bird who in this game has a egg capacity of 1 versus one has 3, like there might be some actual correlation in real life of how many eggs they actually lay in relation to each other.
Yeah. And that kind of just speaks to like just the quality of the work of this game, right? Like that the designer, the developer of this game was so like did their research, right? Like it's one of those things where because this is a very particularly thematic game, it's kind of something you have to be especially critical about in that sense of like, okay, if you're really being like, this is a bird kind of birds, I don't know, bird watching is the wrong word because you're not actually bird watching in this game, but like kind of like the point is like, it's the uniqueness of these birds that is so important to what you're doing and how you're building up this engine, that it is those kinds of details that make it like, oh, I'm not playing like 3 of the same sparrows in one location. Like they like, it could be 3 sparrows, but it's 3 different breeds of sparrows that all have unique and different things, right? And that it actually shows because, as we were kind of alluding to, is all of the artwork is of these unique actual birds that exist, and it has details pertaining to like average stats of, you know, these birds based on the research that this person has done. So it's just this really kind of really cool fact about this game that even if you're not like a nature person, a bird enthusiast or whatever, like just kind of seeing and recognizing and realizing like the variation, the variety, and the uniqueness of, you know, birds in general and kind of how they are, and the fact that it's put into the game realistically, both as like real research and mechanically also important to the game, right, is just this really great kind of blend of like mixing theme with your game mechanics, where it's not just an arbitrary art design or selection of a theme, right?
So I'm also trying to take some components out to more clearly explain some of these things, but there's a lot of stuff in the box. But the other pro I want to mention is then this public scoring board here, which this is what it actually looks like. This is what it actually looks like. So the full board. So you saw most of it in the picture. Let me see. Zoom in, computer. Focus.
Okay, hold it closer to your face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Whatever.
Anyways, you can see each round has a first, second, third place, and then kind of everyone else. And then it marks the rounds. Where then I think this is smart, not just because of what we mentioned about using the cube to mark this, but then also it's basically another way to have goals in the game that in a way that you're also competing each other against for, and competing against each other for, where then it's kind of more than just like you looking at your own board, right, and getting points on your birds and maybe even your bonus card, but there's this kind of public objectives or goals that you're competing for. But then what's also smart about this is, I mean, I don't think I have experience or John has experience with the other side, where this is kind of more of a family friendly side, where you're not competing to see who has the most of whatever goal is randomly put into here, but you're just seeing if you meet a certain number of that goal, such as, you know, birds that live in this certain nest type. How many do you have? Then you mark how many points you'll get for that at the end of the game.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a small touch. I mean, I probably played this side because competitive people, maybe. But I just think it's smart that they have something like this, right? Which in a sense gives it more of that maybe family feel where you're teaching someone. You don't want to be like every way. I'm trying to imagine every way I can beat you, you know? It's like, okay, no, let's just like also compete for points on our own according to this side of the board. And then small thing with the public goals too is these are usually, you have tiles for these. Like I said, one example is like birds that live in a bowl nest. You know, you would see how many birds of that you have at the end of the round and mark how many points you get. And so, but then these goals, right, are tiles that are randomized at the start of the game. So there is variety added to the game with that randomization.
And that's a nice component to any game like this, especially because it's a point collection game. So sometimes with points scoring, like these, what do we call Euro style games, sometimes there's like these very particular strategies that will come out of Eurocentric games, just because that's how they are. It's like, how do I get the most points? And like a lot of times, if the way you get points through goals always remains the same, certain strategies are always the right ones to play. So in this game, it's nice because it's not just a randomization of which ones they are, it's also when they occur in the rounds, right? So that's also the nice thing, because you're not scoring all of it at once at the end of the game. You're scoring it at the end of each of those rounds, which is also very important to kind of figure out, because it's also determining, am I going to be ready as a player to score, whether you're playing the competitive or the kind of less competitive side. Like, you do have to decide, like, am I going to go for trying to get the points of round one based on the birds that I have in my hand, right? Or maybe I'm like, I have I'm not seeing any way that I can score it. So maybe I'll just focus on getting ready for round two or round three, right? Because I know what the goals are coming up, versus somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm going to do round one, I'm going to do great. And then they do it. And then they're like, wait, I can't do any of the other rounds for points, right? So it kind of gives you that different thought process of what birds are going to be playing throughout the game too, where it's not just I always need to play these kinds of birds all of the time, right? Which sometimes happens in these styles of games. So not only do you have the uniqueness of all the cards, the bird cards, you also have the uniqueness of the goals. And these are the public goals. That's not even counting your personal goals, which is another set of special things that you have to do by the end of the game. That is a nice touch.
And so, and then the last pros I would want to mention, group of pros, is with the production. Obviously, I mentioned the art a lot, and if you see John's picture in his background and what I was showing in the beginning, or even in the setup, like the art is so nice. Like with all the color everywhere, but it's also not like, I don't know, I would say it's not like this super modern, really cool looking birds, right? But it's just presenting the bird as it looks naturally, but with its like nice color and vibrancy. Sure. And then component wise, you have like I mentioned, the player board, that's kind of like a folio. I mean, this is just cardboard still, but it's designed like, right, a folio or journal that then opens up to each player's player board. So each person gets one of these. So I think that's nice to kind of like go from this, which doesn't look bad, but then you're like, oh, then like all my stuff. So it's nice looking. You have the rules, which even look nice, have a lot of pictures, which is helpful for setup. And I think that's really important in board games nowadays, that publishers or designers start learning that, right? To have more pictures in their setup to help understand where things go, how things flow, what symbols mean. And then even this itself is like, I mean, I always show friends when I'm showing them this game for the first time, like it has like a linen finish to it. I mean, you can't tell on camera, but it definitely feels different from like regular paper. So it's interesting choice, makes it feel different from any other games rule books. But it is nice. It is nice. And then there's also like an appendix, which then like goes into details of like all the kinds of abilities if you have questions on like how to do them, right? And this is nice because it's clarification. It's not like a separate little book that you have to go to figure out what the bird's abilities do, because those are written on the cards themselves. But it is clarification. So it is a helpful tool when those kind of confusing maybe terms or timing of things happen. And then you also
real quick on the appendix thing, I would say that's kind of a nice touch, because a lot of times in games, what they'll do is they'll tack on the appendix into the primary rule book, and it makes the rule book a big rule book. But when in reality, a lot of it is rule clarification. Whether like design, like a lot of times they'll like there's kind of two ways that people typically do it. Either like rule clarification happens throughout the explanation of the rules, or it's stuck in the back of the book like that. So I think it's also kind of nice to actually have it separated this way, because now you can focus on, if I just need to learn the game, I don't care about all these side rules. I've got the rule book. I can teach the game very quickly to people. Then when you start playing the game and people, of course, will inevitably start asking questions, then it's like, okay, now I can turn to the appendix specifically for maybe that particular card, see if it explains it there. And then if it doesn't explain it there, then we can go back to the rule book itself to see if that has anything to say, right? Or vice versa. You do it the other way, right? Go to the rule book first to see if it says anything, and then if it's specific to the card. So then it's just kind of nice in that way where it's like, it's easier to navigate versus like, I've got this giant book and I have to keep flipping through like 50,000 pages, right?
And then you also have the card tray, which actually stores all the bird cards in like 3 slots here inside. And actually know that if you get the base game, you're not getting this nice double purple one. This is actually from the first expansion. So this is the one I put in my box now. But the base one is actually like a dual blue. And it's actually the same design, layout, everything. So it's just a different color. So that's not a big difference. But then inside, then you have all the stacks of bird cards into its 3 slots. I can't show it because I'm pretty sure it'll fall out. If I tilt it, there you go. And then actually, but going on that point too, with the appendix and understanding how the abilities work, like I think it is nice that it is just clarification, where then the ability is actually written on the bird card itself.
No focus.
I'm not gonna focus.
It's okay. I think it says when played, draw something.
Yeah, draw 2 new bonus cards and keep 1.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's not working. It's okay.
Okay. Anyway, but then actually, what's also nice about how the cards are designed and the graphic design and layout of stuff on it is there is also small details such as let me see if I can find one. Such as certain bird abilities have like icons with it that then also indicate how that bird's mechanic works in a vague way, right? And I think it's kind of smart, considering how many birds there are with abilities, that they don't just create like a whole ton of symbology or icons to understand every single bird's action through picture, right? But they just kind of include certain icons to give a general idea of like, this is how a bird's action will work. It'll require putting a bird under this card, a card under this bird, or it'll require, or this bird is a predator. So, they're going to be eating cards, eating other birds, apparently, which are then randomly drawn from the top of the deck, right? So you can even just eventually see a bird in the market row and kind of see like, okay, it's that kind of mechanic vaguely. And then if that is interesting or fitting with what you're going for, then you can just read the text like, oh, okay, this is specifically what will happen when their ability triggers. So just a small detail of like, providing some direction very quickly or in a very simple, condensed way through symbology without a ton of symbology. And then I think the last thing I would point out is then the eggs, which are nice. I mean, what material is it? It's not wood, right? It's kind of
resin, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, maybe.
If I remember correctly.
But then I believe the game came with these boxes too. This, if you can see in the glare, SM. So the Stonemaier little trays. I think the game actually came with these because I didn't go out of my way to buy these for the game. but it comes with these for you to put your components into, and it all fits in the box. So that's just like, I mean, I love when a game comes with storage solutions. So
The eggs always remind me of those little chocolate
yeah, do
eggs
not eat
from
these.
Easter,
Do
but
not
don't eat them. So if you play with kids, just make sure they know that. And also know that they're not allowed to swap in their chocolates to get more eggs.
Don't keep like the Easter colored M&Ms next to these when you're playing the game.
Careful when you play Easter.
And then small detail is, as you can see, these are the color of the eggs. There's like, very kind of pastel colors, which is very nice. Not like super like popping out at you, but fitting with kind of the vibrant, but not like too bold color scheme, I think, for the game. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, there's like this blue, pink, white, yellow, green. Know that the purple is not in the base game either. That's from the expansion. As you can maybe guess, the expansion is all about purple colored things. And so that's all. I mean, that's, I think, all the pros I have to say about the game. And so moving on to the cons, John, do you want to start with the cons you have with the game?
Yeah, I'll say honestly, I don't have too many significant cons as far as I can think of. I will say one of the slight cons for me, and I know we actually talked about it in the pros, is actually the feeling of the loss of actions over time. It is something that is kind of weird for me personally, just playing a game where if you're playing a game and you're losing actions versus either staying the same or gaining actions, it's kind of a weird twist. Again, I think it might just be, again, the mentality I've had of so many other games doing it the reverse way. So to me, because it's this idea of like, I'm not able to do as many things, right? Like, which when you take things away from players to do in games, you have to do that really, really well to feel really good about it, right? So I do think that this game does it well, as we kind of like, as we said, it actually is a pro in that sense, but there still is kind of a feeling of like, I'm still losing actions and I really can't do as many things. And it does help accelerate the game because these games can get really bloated if you don't do it, but just still this kind of arbitrary loss of actions is kind of this, it doesn't like, there's no thematic reason why you should be losing turns or actions. There's no kind of, yeah, there's basically just no reason other than like, it's to make the game go faster as you progress through the game, right? So that's the first thing. And then kind of on that note is also the fact that it's a 4-round game. So it's actually pretty short of a game, right? Like the game overall is only 4 rounds in total. So it, like, especially once people know how to play the game and you play it kind of on a regular basis, you don't play a lot of rounds in all honesty. It really is only 4 major scoring rounds and that's it, right? Like, there's no other ways to, well, there are a couple other ways to get points, but those are like the primary point scoring ways to kind of get ahead of your opponents. So it is relatively short given how many things you're doing on the board at a time. So it's kind of an odd thing. And again, I don't think it's a huge con to the game. It's just more of like given it's a Euro style game, it feels a little surprising that would be kind of the way that it happens. But again, I don't think these are big cons by any means. This is more of me thinking of like, of things that made me feel weird when I played the game. Those are kind of 2 things that stuck out to me of like, I feel unsure about how these mechanics work for me. And maybe not necessarily that they're really bad or like poorly designed mechanics. I don't think that's the case. It's just more like it leaves a weird feeling to me when I play the game.
Because John wants to do everything.
I like my 30-minute turns. Thank you very much.
So for me, I would say the biggest con that comes to mind, and I think it's quite apparent after a couple plays, is that at the end of the game, I mentioned the different things that score you points. And so eggs, as you lay eggs onto the bird cards, and it's basically a resource you'll use to play more birds later. But then as you're adding birds and they're adding eggs and they're still there on your board, they're still worth points. Each egg is a point. And so toward the end of the game, whether it's the fourth round, halfway through the fourth round, like at some point, most people, or basically almost always I played, people switch to a strategy of laying eggs to get points at the very end. Because by the end, you're usually have a certain number of birds in your board already, right? Up to a certain column, maybe like the third or fourth column. And so as you get that far out, when you do those actions, like the laying egg action, you're actually laying more eggs than you are in the very beginning of the game when you didn't have birds in that row. But then as you're laying more eggs, then each one of those eggs is points. And then you start weighing like, okay, I'm laying maybe 4 eggs, and then I could use maybe 2 eggs to then, play this bird card, which is worth a certain number of points. But then that's actually giving up 2 points to play a bird that, is it going to be worth more than 2 points or net you more than, well, nothing basically?
Yeah.
Right. And so is it worth it to actually play birds at the end where you have to get the food, spend the eggs, which are points? Or should I just lay eggs and get points straight and simple? And so most of the time people reach a point where they just do the lay egg actions, and their row that lays eggs maybe has birds that also help lay more eggs. So maybe you're getting more points that way than actually spending eggs to play another bird. And so that becomes kind of a fairly common end game strategy, making the end game feel kind of the same most of the times, I would say. So that's the biggest con, I would say, just because that's where the game can maybe, after you've played the game several times, the end game can start feeling stale. Aside from that, I think smaller things like, maybe like thematically, the whole idea of what I just mentioned, why would I use 2 eggs to make 1 bird? That doesn't make sense in real life, right? And it doesn't really make sense that I'm using an egg to play a bird card of a different bird, because birds don't birth other different kinds of birds.
Wait, that's not how it works?
Random birds come out of random eggs. That's how nature works.
Bird eggs are gotcha balls, right? They just pop out whatever, It could be this kind of bird. It could be another bird. It could be a hummingbird that becomes a bald eagle.
Yeah, there you go. But that's just a really small thematic thing that maybe won't help when you're teaching the game. But before that point, it still makes sense, like eggs to birds,
Yeah.
And so that's a small con. The other small con is that I mentioned the cool idea of the double-sided board for the public goals. But on the competitive side, the one thing that can be a little confusing for people when you're playing with this or learning it is that when players tie, like, if they fulfill this objective, whatever it is, say birds that live in a bowl nest, and 2 players have the most number of birds of that in the round, they would both tie and go in this first place spot, but then you would skip the second place and then award the third place, and then anyone else. And so I think just that little way of tracking it makes sense. Like you wouldn't necessarily just immediately have someone who's second place who maybe will score the same, if not about the same amount of points, because the 2 first place people have to split the number of points in that spot, right? It makes sense, but it can just be a little unusual when you're learning it. Like, oh yeah, no, now we need to make sure to skip because they tied.
It's almost like it could have been like they just extend the top of that paper slightly to be like 2 or more stack equals, and like show like a symbol version of that, right? Where it shows like however many scores. I don't know, maybe something like that, right? If they could have found a way, but yeah. I agree with you. Like on the card itself, given how much we talk about symbology, that shows how you play this game so much.
Okay,
it really doesn't tell you how to score that way. It's in the rule book, but it's like, it's surprising that they didn't add that, or even in the box itself, something that mentions that rule or like shows like, times x cube equals whatever. I don't know, right? So it's possible. Other games have done stuff, I feel like, that have been similar mechanically, kind of symbolism, but
And then lastly, I think one more point that can be confusing when teaching people is, so you have the player board again, and as I mentioned in the little walkthrough, was that there's these 4 action rows, right? And 3 of these are habitats, and that's why they had the full size of a card for each slot. But then this top is basically, it is an equal row, an equal action. It's not like a lesser action or a rarer action that you get to do. Like, this is literally just as available as any of these other 3, but it's just this small little printed row up here. Right. And so, I mean, I understand why design wise, where this is like a nice size, right? This is like paper size, right? And so it would be a waste of a lot of space to make the board even bigger, make this row card size, even though you're never putting any cards in that row, just to make it look the same size as the other rows. But it's just confusing for some people when I've been teaching it, that like, oh, no, you would indicate with a cube along this really top rim row when you're doing that action, just as you would put a cube in somewhere in this row when you're doing this action. And so, yeah, it can just be confusing when people are first learning it, that the size is different. So do I actually put something there to indicate I'm doing the action? And the answer is yes. It's the same as every other row. You just don't end up putting cards there.
And it's a little small because, like, as we were saying, the cubes kind of stack together. So if you're kind of tracking your actions or what you've done over a turn, especially on that top row, it's like, I don't have a lot of space to put cubes in that spot, right? Especially for the early rounds, because you're probably playing a lot of birds early game. So you can get a little bit like, like your cubes are falling off the board or whatever. So, just small thing, I guess.
Yeah. So those are like kind of like my few small things on top of my main one being the end game can feel stale. But aside from that, I don't think I have any other cons. I don't know if you do. And so with that,
Dice. No, just kidding.
And so with that, I do actually want to mention, before we go on to the ratings and weights, is that I had mentioned this game has 1 expansion, and it actually came out with a 2nd expansion recently. So the first expansion is the European expansion, this size box. Fairly lovely, very purple. As I mentioned, the color for this one is purple. So it introduced like the purple eggs and the purple card tray. And it mainly, obviously, the important thing is that it introduces European birds, whether the base game is all about American birds. I don't think, maybe North
American, I think primarily.
Yeah, maybe the Americas.
Yeah.
And so this one introduces European birds. So a whole set of new birds. I think it says 81 all unique, all new birds. And obviously relating to Europe, and also a new kind of bird ability. Because there were the ones in the original game, there were, if you saw on certain cards, let's see it here, there was like a brown band, or some birds had a pink band, which are also an indicator of how the ability happens. Like brown ones are activated when you choose that row, but then pink ones are ones that happen on other people's turns. Well, then this expansion introduces this teal kind of ability, which is basically other ways to score at the end of rounds. So then there's more than just the public end of round goals. You can actually even play your own birds that help you score at the end of rounds.
That was part of my con, remember? There's only one real way to score. Weird mechanic they added.
And then the newest expansion, which I think is maybe just releasing now, people who are part of the Stonemaier Champions membership could have pre-ordered it, like me. And so that would be the Oceania expansion. So birds from Asia. Not just Asia.
No, birds from the Oceania.
Pacific Islands and places like that, right? And so this is the shape of this box, and it is a yellow theme, so you get like kind of very yellow eggs in this, and it also introduces again a new kind of bird ability, which is yellow, which is, I think, scoring at the end of the game. So additional ways you yourself can get points at the end of the game if you have those kinds of birds.
Mhm.
And why it's the shape is actually because it introduces basically replacement player boards, not to fix any of the text or stuff on the original, but it's because it introduces a new resource aside from the food like the worm and berries that we have in the base game. It introduces nectar, which is a different resource that is actually used differently. And so the player board actually has sections that indicate when nectar is used for that new mechanic. I mean, I don't know all the details of that new one because clearly I haven't opened my second expansion and played it. But I just know, yeah, it has to do with the new resource of nectar that's used differently. And so then the player boards also have to include that now to track it. And so, yeah, so there's those two expansions. If you guys are interested to know how this game has expanded, or if you guys already love Wingspan and, want to know what else there is to it, there are those two expansions.
Mhm.
And so now going on to rating, and John guesses the weight. Wingspan. So John, actually, wait, and let me go to my BGG page just to make sure my rating is accurate. Still accurate. But then for you, what is your rating and the weight that you guessed?
So for me, as you probably could tell, so I'll be honest, I actually haven't played the game nearly as much overall in comparison to other games that we've played throughout. But I do think this is a really well-made, well-designed game. I enjoyed the game a lot the few times I did play it, and I've actually watched it almost an equal number of times that I've played the game. So it's about like I played it about 3 times. I've watched other people play the game about 3 times as well, 3 to 4 times ish. It's kind of around that range. So I would say that my overall impressions is really positive, as you could probably tell. So my personal rating for this game is actually a 8.5 out of 10. I don't think it hits the 9 or higher because I think that's a very exclusive group. I don't even know if I have games in my head that are at that level, because it just has to be a game that
has so many dice that
yes, that I can throw them at Ben. No, but I mean, this is I feel like this is an essential game, right, for people to have, right? Like if you do more than just like Monopoly, Codenames, right? Like if you want to play a game that kind of teaches you like board gaming, like getting into more like deeper complex board gaming than purely just like party games or that kind of style, or very basic kind of point collection type games, this is a definite game that you need to have. Like you just need to play it, you need to have it, you need to have experience this game. So that is my rating. And then for weight, 2.17.
I don't know if you're pulling random numbers or actually thinking about other things you tried rating.
No, I'm just pulling random numbers. Every time I do this, it's a random weight number.
it's like for like this other game you said like 3, and that game was like a filler. No, I'm just kidding. So before showing if John won a copy of
2.25. 2.25.
What, you're taking me what I said as a hint? You know what? Fine, 2.25.
It's probably 2.18.
So before I reveal if John won a copy of Wingspan from me,
which I did not, probably.
I will say for me, I mean, I do agree with what John said of like, this is a game you have to get if you're into basically just modern board gaming, beyond those kind of basic roll and move or just play cards for points games. This has, as you can tell, a lot going on, but it comes together so well. And again, isn't hard to learn, it has beautiful production, a welcoming theme. And even from my experience, like I think I've probably, like after teaching it to different groups of friends, like convinced them to get the game. Like probably like a handful of people have gotten the game after I've played it with them, whether it's like my cousin who just loves the game, to like a friend whose mom actually is interested in birds like knows these kinds of bird types and facts about them, that like she got the game and she recognized the birds in it, and then those friends are happy too because now they love the game too, so they get to actually play it. So very big deal, I think, very popular game. But my score then is a 9.
Ooh.
So it is high up there for me, and I would even, like, if I were to roughly guess, like, I think it would be in my top 10. Uh, Not doing it in the technical way right now to figure it out, but I think it is probably in my top 10 because of its rating and how much I've played it. I played it, well, yeah, so I played it at least 20 times. So played it a lot with different groups of people, and yeah, so everything I said, I think it is an amazing game. I love Stone Meyer's games. And it just came together really well. Weight wise, 2.41.
Yeah, I'm rusty on the weight. It's been a couple weeks. So,
So even more than John thought. I mean, 2.4 is almost at like that middle weight, right? Of
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's technically, that would be a, what is it?
Lower rating technically.
I mean, I think 2.4 is like almost medium, maybe around medium. Where's the scale?
Click on
No,
it.
I don't want to. No, don't go away.
Yeah,
Light,
medium.
medium, light, medium, heavy. So 3 would be technically medium. So it is like, I think light to medium, I'm guessing, is what that means, which is fitting, right? It's not actually like a full-on medium, heavy, sit-down, long time game. But yeah, so that is our review of Wingspan. Oh, actually, sorry, I didn't even point out average rating 8.1. So
I'm
very
closer.
solid with 40,000 ratings. So very solid up there. And it is according to Board Game Geek, #1 family game, and in the top 20 overall. So very solid, very great game. And so, yes, that is our review of Wingspan. If you found this helpful, interesting, hope you will share this video with friends, family, people you play board games with, and hope you'll consider subscribing on YouTube and following on the new Instagram that I started just recently for this channel. You can find us at I Got Board Game. And so until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.
Hey.